Welcome to Interstellar Cosmic Conversations, where we share experiences from our hearts to empower others. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Interstellar Cosmic Conversations. Tonight, our guest is Laura Eisenhower. Laura is an intuitive astrologist, a global alchemist, a well-known worldwide speaker, and not to mention the great-granddaughter of the 34th President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
it's good to be here.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the first time that Laura and I have ever connected other than through email. And I shared with her how I enjoy doing this. It's a little bit, I'm a little bit nervous every time I do an interview, but I just feel like it's just a great way to connect without any kind of expectations. And it's just like a great way to get to know one another and get a good feel for each other's energy. So I really appreciate you doing this and not knowing me and being, so receptive of participating. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you and I share a common bond with our love for our mother planet and humanity. And one of the things that I like to do with the interviews is I want to hold a space that allows for communication, creativity, and in that remembering who we are, getting back to our sovereignty. And there's a lot of information that's being shared that brings us into fear for sure. But I want to share in a way that empowers us. And so one of the things that I would like just tonight is to focus on your experiences and especially with Mars and tie that into what's going on our planet right now. I listened to where you said that you were able to see through the military and industrial complex that's been presented to us. And there was an attempt to recruit you in 2006 to go off planet to Mars in 2012, and that you were able to see behind the scenes what was going on, and that the plan is to bring some of humanity to Mars colonies, and you knew you wanted to stay with Earth to help her through her ascension period. So one of the things that I wanted to start with is, were you made aware of who was recruiting you?
Well, gosh, I became aware of aspects of who was recruiting me beyond what they were presenting themselves as. Basically, it first started off as just, a person that I met, and that person was sort of a voice for all these people behind him. And they're a group called the Aviary. And the Aviary is a group of individuals with code names named after birds, like owl, penguin, falcon, I think, and all these, different code names. And what they normally do is or at least this is what they present themselves as, they handle UFO cases, and they have something called a weird desk where all the different abduction stories kind of goes to them if they are something that is voiced or even something that they track, which I was beginning to discover that they have that ability. And so when I was with this person, and I was forming a relationship with this person who I met at a gathering, who I was very... I felt this familiarity with, he would come back and visit me after going to these secret meetings in Washington, D.C., which was where I was living at the time. Previous to that, I had felt this control energy on me, and I was very frustrated because I felt like I couldn't create anything in my life without having this force upon me that was trying to get me to do something else. So I eventually surrendered to it, and I looked at it sort of like a showdown, like, okay, whatever that force is, I want to get through it. I want to understand it because it's trying to take me somewhere. It's trying to do something. And so I ended up moving from California back to the DC area, went to that gathering, met that person. And when we started to date each other, he would come over after going to these meetings. And he did mention the name of the group, which is the Aviary. There's also another one called the Aquarium, and they have like fish names.
Okay.
And I was definitely told what's...
You broke up.
And it wasn't all laid out from the beginning.
You might want to share again. You broke up.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me see if I go off video, if that'll help you any.
Okay.
Oh,
stronger can I now?
Okay.
So I did hear some group, but I was not able to talk to them directly. I was more hearing, information based on what his relations were with them and what their plans were, and that they wanted me to be involved with this journey to go to Mars in 2012. So this was in 2006. And I didn't see it at the time as a recruitment. I didn't see it for what it actually was. I just thought that I met somebody who was in a group of, with a group of people that were planning this expedition, and I could take it or leave it. I was just dating somebody that, had those plans, and I could get out of them easily because he probably would have approached anybody. This is just who he is, and this is what he does.
Yeah.
I later came to discover that he was specifically sent on a mission to find me, and that they had tracked me, and then discovered that he was doing missions on their behalf outside of the one to find me. And that's where I started to really do my research, because he would get phone calls and then disappear for days and not really remember where he went. I noticed that he would be given something over the phone, he would hang up and he'd be gone, and then it's like, okay, where did he go? I couldn't really get in touch with him. And he referred to one of the people as his handler. And in 2006, I only really knew that term from like a movie, or, I'd heard it along the way, but I wasn't as well researched in all this stuff back then as I am now. And so I saved all the emails that I got, which were basically pulling me in more and more to this plan to go to Mars in 2012, and some of the details surrounding that mission. It related to the type of craft we would be taking, which were called ARC, spelled A-R-C, and things about possible planetary cataclysms and how this was actually for my protection. And so I was aware of something called Alternative 3, which was something that took place during the Eisenhower administration, connected to these alternatives that were presented to the governments that had to do with the future of humanity. Alternatives 1, 2, and 3. So some of those alternatives included going to underground bases. Some included, well, there's only 3. The first one was about like blasting a hole in the stratosphere to rid the planet of pollution. The second one was underground bases. The third one was to go colonize other planets. So from my estimation, the agenda started off pretty well intentioned, because it makes sense to be concerned about those sort of things. And, and it also makes sense to want to protect the human genome in the event of a catastrophe. But something didn't feel right, because I couldn't talk to these people, and it was just basically through him. And about 6 months into the relationship, he told me that they sent him to find me, and that I really didn't have a choice and I had to go. And so I was like, okay, this isn't just some invite. This isn't just some mission that my partner happens to be going on and I can take it or leave it. They're pretty intent on making sure I go. And so I started to really research the names of the individuals that I was hearing about and what this group was, that I kept hearing the name of, the Aviary, the Aquarium. And a lot of the stuff that I was getting wasn't really giving me a whole lot. So I kept following my intuition until I got to the bottom of what I felt was going on, which is that this agenda had been infiltrated and there was something else going on, and that if there are cataclysms, we don't even know if that's natural, because I was already pretty understanding of the fact that there's things like HARP technologies, weather modification, and chemtrails. And I was still just sort of trying to wrap my head around that. But I started to connect the dots. I'm like, okay, wait a second. We're evacuating a planet. And if it's based on a negative agenda that we're running from, well, we got to handle the negative agenda, because most of the human race isn't getting this invite. And then I was thinking, well, there might be certain individuals in the group that are in the know, that are trying to create this scenario to send a few people, to Mars on this colony, while the rest of the human race is left in a very vulnerable position. And I really wanted to honor what I felt my mission was, which I was aware of since I was a child, which is all about this Ascension window period. And I kept figuring, how am I going to be able to do this on another planet? And if this has been infiltrated and we are running from something, or it's a part of these dark agendas, which I believe they were, I need to step back and understand it fully and share this with the public. And then it got, really dangerous as I tried to resist going. I had to basically flee from it all. And he said, if you don't go, they're going to take you anyway. And I realized that if I become public about it and I give it a voice, it'd probably protect me more than keeping quiet. Because as I began to become more public, you know, other whistleblowers were coming on the scene that were sharing stories about Mars as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, through a lot of dot connecting and what happened during Eisenhower's administration with Project Paperclip and, you know, the Admiral Byrd expedition to Antarctica, and the fact that we are still dealing with the Nazis and we hadn't quite won the war,
mm-hmm.
and just the infiltration of the American government that I was getting more and more in touch with, I knew that, you know, something sinister was going on, and it wouldn't be in my best interest or humanity's.
Yeah. Well, did they actually tell you what role they wanted you to play if you went to Mars?
That I'd be in some sort of leadership position, and I mean, they tried to make it all like an attractive sounding offer,
mm-hmm.
and that was a red flag. That mm-hmm. whole "you're special" thing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, everybody's special.
Yeah. Well, so
yeah.
Go ahead. Well, so another thing that I was thinking about too, when just the concept, because I do feel the deception and taking people to Mars myself, just on some experiences that I've personally had and on some conversations with other people and their experiences and hearing your story as well. But the interesting thing to me is when they're recruiting specific humans to take off planet, do you know what they're looking for in these people? Why they choose the people that they choose?
Well, it might relate to DNA, bloodlines, and also wishing to stop certain people that have strong missions. I mean, I felt I was targeted because if I were to stay here during this window period, I would be doing the work that I came here to do. Mm-hmm. So the fact that something's trying to take me away from that, knowing that there's this hidden shadow government, even though I didn't have all the bits and pieces that I do now and the terminologies, what I came to discover with some of the individuals that kind of defected from the group to help me to understand what was going on was that it did relate to bloodline. It did relate to something about my DNA, and that the work that I was here to do, it was to somewhat sabotage it or to take it someplace else. And the thing is that with the compartmentalization that exists in the shadow government or in some of these branches and factions within the shadow government, not everybody is seeing it the same way, or not everybody's being told the same thing. Mm-hmm. For others, they might have thought, well, there are a lot of really well-intentioned people that thought this was a great idea and that I shouldn't turn it down. But my suspicions and some of the validations I got from those that were kind of in the group or not fully affiliated with the group, but knew enough about them, you know, helped me to see that, yeah, I mean, this was a targeting. So when I did my research about all these different names that were a part of this group, after about 2 weeks of just diving into every rabbit hole I could about it, I discovered that they were linked to things like psychotronic weaponry, MyLabs, even gang stalking and mind control, you know, everything that one would not want to be involved with. And because they told me that I could have a handler, then I felt, okay, this is all about control. Mm-hmm. I don't really have a say here. And yeah, but I noticed that not everybody was feeling the same way. Supposedly this group is connected to MJ-12, and MJ-12 are the folks that have their hands on the alien technology or are deciding how to use that technology based on certain agendas that have been established by off-planet entities.
Okay.
That they're working with.
So when they tell you that you have a handler, they try to present that to you as a positive?
Yeah. They said, yeah, we have a handler for you. And I said, I really don't want a handler. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think they expected me to rebel against it or yeah, I don't know, have my own discernment about it. But it really helped me to strengthen my intuition. It helped me to really realize that I can hear my inner voice, because there wasn't really anything else to go on except for what they were presenting. And they were doing it in a way that wasn't abusive, but yet at the same time it was, because I wasn't being told the whole picture. Yeah. And I wasn't able to talk to the core group. It was always through him. And basically what I learned was they set me up with a person that they located with me in a past life with what's called looking glass technologies. It's a quantum access technology that can read things from the past timelines and also project, you know, into future timelines to help them kind of put the chess pieces where they want them. And that they saw that we had this alliance or connection in a past life, and they pulled him in and manipulated him, started to mind control him, to use him as bait to pull me in. to do something on Mars. Now, it doesn't mean that, okay, as far as I understand, there's a lot of individuals that are enslaved there. They're promised certain things, and when they get there, it's not what they were told. But at the same time, you know, one has to wonder, well, what if I had gone? I mean, who knows which particular race I would have been dealing with, indigenous cultures there, or just an isolated Mars colony. I was never really given that level of information. But when I look at different whistleblowers that have been Mars experiencers, you know, that helps me to see, I don't know, that really it's about creating new world order and having a safe place to go while they create this planetary destruction, which is what we're trying to overcome on this timeline right now. I mean, there's multiple timelines, but we're trying to establish our grounding on an organic ascension timeline, which allows us to go through the DNA upgrades to achieve that level of mastery where we recognize ourselves as the advanced technology. And that's what I've always been geared towards since I was a kid, is helping us to awaken to what we're really made of. And then there's no being that we can't overcome the control influence of. And that's what we've been kept in the dark about. So even if it was a positive agenda, I knew I had a role here to play.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on a couple of things that I wanted to go into as well that are going to tie into that. So I'll just kind of go into the question, and then we can maybe go a little bit deeper, because one of the things that has been brought into my awareness, and it seems to kind of play out in a lot of the films that they're putting out also, is the experiences that a lot of people have had with Mars, including some military people that are involved in remote viewing and may have also been on the planet itself, seem to associate that planet with like these octopus type creatures, but they're also very robotic, mechanical, like what you see in like these movies that come out of the sky that look like they've got the claws, kind of like octopus like. In fact, when I spoke with someone that's involved with remote viewing with the military, that was one of the things that he was saying that was still very much there on the planet. And it just seems like there's something that's kind of dark and sinister with regards to Mother Earth and this relationship. That's just the way that I'm picking up on it. But I wanted to ask you, did you feel that in any way that this was to try to get like to sever us from her planetary body because of the organic ascension line, to maybe create some type of distortion and cause people to go to a timeline that wasn't meant for them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it felt like. I kept thinking, why would we need to evacuate Earth? You know, unless there's some massive invasion going on, which I have been aware that there has been. Why would we want to just, you know, take off without informing humanity about what's going on, you know, what's going on with their tax dollars? If there's something we really need to protect ourselves from, we need to come together in unity consciousness to overcome it, not have just a few run away while everybody else is, you know, left here to sort of struggle without the advanced technologies, or without just the awareness of what we're stepping into in this ascension window period. And because the date was 2012 that they wanted me to be there, that's like the most crucial time. That's the peak time of this ascension energy. And it did seem like an artificial timeline to me, and I'm pretty convinced that it is. I mean, I can't imagine anything that involves leaving planet Earth as being part of the ascension timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And I also love when you talk about unity consciousness. I just recently heard you share that. And when you break down unity consciousness, that's oneness is diversity and harmony. And I really love that.
Yeah. And that's really what it's about. I think when we see control or anything that has some level of control, it's all about conforming to something, becoming something you're not, having to join some sort of group mind or belief system. And, you know, our physical bodies and just our soul essence can feel something way off with that. It causes panic. It takes us away from our own sense of our own personal divine power and our connection to the earth. So it did feel like something's trying to disconnect me from the mother and put me in a completely different scenario that's going to compromise me even more than whatever these attacks are.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you can't run from attack. You can't allow those attacks to steer you away from being able to face it head on and do what's right. That to me is, I'd rather die with that in my conscience versus giving in, because I believe, what they're presenting to me. I don't feel like they know the Mother Earth energies like I do. These are a group of men that are just playing with all these alien technologies. And so I knew, like, this is your opportunity to really stand strong and break free of these control forces.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm going to go into something else too that has come up with me, and just the thought process of this, what they're trying to accomplish. When you would look at the like false god entity that tries to claim itself to be creator of all, and which is like the god of religions that tries to pull us all in and make us feel like we're, inadequate and have to be subservient. And there's always this talk of a rapture and, taking people off and like the chosen people. And it's kind of like a harvest. And, there's a lot of talk about a harvest. And I kind of also was wondering, how do you feel that in any way is connected to it? Like when you think about the biblical rapture and them trying to pull people off planet to take them off the timelines, do you think that is the same energy behind that? How does that feel to you?
Again, so much is fragmented. There's so many different groups. There's so much compartmentalism. I think that there's controller groups that are wanting to put the pieces where they want to put them, manipulating those with good intentions, that what they're doing is for the betterment of humanity, or this is what has to be done. It's a necessity. And I think it's all connected to a false ascension timeline that is not about human consciousness expanding. It doesn't include us becoming multidimensional advanced beings. It just has to do with submitting to something that doesn't allow for much soul development, which causes digression. So we see those timelines, and where did they end up going? Mm-hmm. And we see this in our galactic history, that a digression of the human body took place. And even Dan Bursch, some people criticize me for even bringing him up, but he mentions, and I've heard this from numerous sources, that a lot of these grays or EBEs are future human selves that digressed. They were on those timelines, and they're coming back to gain genetic material in order to heal their dying race, which is part of what Eisenhower was presented with when he had contact with grays. But at the same time, those treaties have been they've been around for, I don't know, probably 10 years before him. The Roosevelt administration was dealing with contact, and the origins of those treaties actually were with Churchill, Crowley, and Hitler, Aleister Crowley. And people might ask, where'd you get that information from? Well, if you study it, you'll find Lisa Renee, Ascension Glossary, her website, energeticsynthesis.com. And if a person really understands the full body of her work, she's pure truth. So I take very seriously the research she's done, or the information that comes in, because she's connected with the Guardians as like a walk-in. And this was the scenario that connected with what was being presented to the governments about these alternatives. We were dealing with zetas, but there's both positive and negative, depending on what place in the timeline they're traveling back from to give us this kind of information. Now, we can dismiss that and say, oh, they're not future human selves, and I'm just as open to that. I can only kind of go on what my research has shown me and what feels right, but I always have to have an open mind to seeing it in a different way. And I think we're dealing with many species, and they have many different sort of stories connected to them that might look similar.
Okay, so I have a question about that, because that's one of the things that is also of an interest to me when we're talking about like the organic timeline, and then we talk about these different timelines that branch off. And then you brought up something that's kind of is something that feels right to me as well, about the grays being from a future timeline. But do you see that as us in the future timeline, like coming back to integrate that aspect of ourselves, or do you feel like that they're completely different beings from the future?
I think they're us, they're future human selves. Those individuals that chose to go on that timeline, I feel like they're coming back to be reintegrated, but at the same time, for them to be what they are now, they want us to go down that timeline to validate the fact that they now exist, but they want to maybe alter it a little bit. Okay. It depends which time there's P42s and P52s. So supposedly the grays that are 52,000 years into the future are more benevolent, and the ones that are younger, 42,000 years into the future, aren't so much. I mean, I feel like our role is to understand that we need to integrate it to heal it, and be careful of what they present to us so that we can do ourselves a favor and choose something that'll advance us so that we can step into our avatar consciousness and our ascended mastery versus a path of digression. Because it's not just grays from the future. They're also grays coming from the Orion Wars that are still in that sort of galactic war experience. And the thing is, time is not linear. So we're dealing with past, present, and future sort of all at once. And so it's kind of hard to determine whether they're from the past or the future, but it all kind of loops back around anyway. But I think the way that we can really distinguish is not that certain grays aren't advanced. I mean, they are advanced, but one will notice that their reproductive abilities decline, the way that, you know, food is assimilated and this or that, and the way that they address those that they choose to make contact with. Some have a very horrible experience and feel incredibly violated, and others, you know, speak of beings of love that felt, you know, completely different. So I think there's a lot of diversity in the type of beings that we relate to, just like there's a lot of diversity in the human race. You know, we all have different ways to get to where we want to go, and there are these diversions. I mean, artificial intelligence and the Draco reptilian influence, and how they've enslaved so many souls and turned them into these workers, which very often are grays. Not all of them, but for sure, like, I think the ones that have been dealing with our governments, they presented themselves as wanting to heal their dying race, knowing that they digress and their life cycle ends. So the only way they can keep their life cycle alive is to go back and get that genetic information, or to observe us and try and get that soul quality back. But some don't come from that place. They're still serving a reptilian agenda. And that's why discernment's huge, and we can't look at every case like it's the same.
Okay, you brought up something that I just really would love. I don't think this has ever been addressed with you, and because this is I want to say in the truther community. I used to say like in our community, but I feel like even now it's hard to say our community because it feels like there's so much kind of back and forth right now that it feels like there's a division that's growing that we need to kind of bring back together. I kind of feel like that. And that's one of the reasons that I'm all about empowerment and get into clarity and just, you know, coming in together with a common bond instead of always kind of like trying to tear each other apart. And there's something that really, you being the great granddaughter of the 34th president, and something that goes around in the truth community all the time is that every president, everyone in government is an evil reptilian with an evil agenda. And so they have everyone as shape-shifting reptilians. And so I would really like to, I mean, I can't even imagine how that feels for you, just in who you are and your lineage. And I would love this as an opportunity for you to share some of your experiences and your perspective. And also, again, you know, not all reptilians or grays or human beings, you know, whatever, are evil. But I would just like for you to share what you can on that, if you would.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of disinformation out there, and I've tried to come from a total place of neutrality because I'm really here for truth. I came into this family line for a reason, and usually I put out a video and there's comments like, oh, your great-grandfather did this, you know, he's that, he's a war criminal, he sold us out to the grays, and oh, he's probably rolling in his grave, and how could he possibly be proud of what you're doing? You know, just all this, some are trolls, of course. But I've looked at it all. I've looked at all the information, all the rumors, and from a neutral perspective, I've just really tried to investigate. Of course, you know, being related, I don't want to see the negative, but I'm willing to, because that's what it's going to take. We all have to with our own ancestral lines in order to heal. So I was more than willing, as uncomfortable as it might be. So again, the treaties didn't begin with Eisenhower. By the time it got to his administration, it was considered a surrender because they had these advanced technologies, and there was already an infiltration happening. As far as my experience of my family, I was like, okay, I might very well be, you know, dealing with some sort of reptilian component. I have to be open to that. Maybe there's something going on in my family that I don't remember. So I did hypnoregression and all sorts of things to try and just, you know, get some clarity, because we can't just assume that we have a full picture when memories get erased, and there's even like splintering and fragmentation of, you know, the trauma-based mind control. But I have to say, nothing came up, no memories like that. I wasn't involved in anything that compromised me so much, except for just your basic targeting coming from outside of the family. And but I paid a lot of attention to the family energy. And one big sign was, okay, well, there's no trust funds. We're all a very, very close-knit family, but nobody's sitting on any wealth. Basically, what I'm convinced of is Eisenhower did not sell his soul to anything. There's no benefits that we're getting by being a different type of entity, or him being a different type of entity in the presidential office. Most everybody in the Eisenhower family is very humble. Nobody's got a lot of money, and if anybody's doing well, they worked really, really hard for it. Nothing was just handed down to us. We're not like the Rothschild or some of these presidential bloodlines that sit on all the wealth and are, you know, doing all this stuff out of the desire for control. I mean, Eisenhower was one of the first whistleblowers. He's the one that warned us about the military-industrial complex. And people can judge him all they want for what he couldn't do, but a true reptilian wouldn't even gone that far, or have tried to defeat the Nazis in a war. I mean, that was where his heart was at. He's all about unity. He's all about love, and he's a very spiritual being. And my experience in the family, and just listening to my aunts and uncles and my mom and their recollections of their upbringing with him. I mean, he was just a family man. He was just a very deep spiritual family man who disliked war, who was horrified by the things that he saw, who was, you know, compromised just in the position he was in, surrounded by a lot of these darker beings. And he ended up having 8 heart attacks. So if he was really on board, I think it all would have played out a lot differently. And I think people, you know, people have said to me, there's an echo. You hear that?
Yeah.
People have said to me, oh, you know, I saw you shape-shifting in a video, or I held, or I shook your hand one time and I felt clammy like a reptilian. I'm like, you know what? Go wherever you want with that. It's fine. I know who I am. And, I mean, people are entitled to think what they want, but I've always been amazed. I mean, there's a channeling by Carl Mollison. I made the mistake of saying Kirk before, that did a channeling on Eisenhower. And I'm very skeptical about channelers, but the information that was coming through is all about major clarity with what these wars are about, how the Anunnaki basically commissioned these reptilians to do their dirty work, just as they use humans to do theirs. It really helps map out the bigger picture, and it talks about light workers and the importance of light workers and how difficult it is for light workers to step forward because of the amount of attack and insult that they experience, which, you know, can shut a person down. But I recommend people look that up. Carl Mollison channeling Dwight Eisenhower. He even brings up me because I ask him, what do you think of your daughter? Or not, excuse me, what do you think of your great-granddaughter who is out there sharing all this information? He said some, you know, really incredible things, and I felt like it was truth because I got the goosebumps and I was really moved by it. So I would say that we're one of the presidential bloodline families that aren't a part of the 13 families. There's no association with that. There's no ritual. There's nothing but a lot of simplicity, a lot of just love and support and non-judgment. I mean, we all have our different roles, our different occupations, our different life calling, and we just come together with absolute love and respect in a very humble, normal kind of family way, knowing that there's this incredible sort of history we're trying to wrap our heads around, and we're all getting different pieces. I'm the kid, though, that I'm going right into the UFOs, the ET races, and then about the potential of him being a war criminal. I worked with channelers and mediums and psychics to get to the bottom of it, because I'm pretty darn convinced that there is a rewriting of history, which we know exists, time travel manipulation, and all sorts of ways to change history. Not pretend, but convince or find a way to prove that the Holocaust never happened. Well, I can safely say that when I was a kid looking through family albums, there was my grandfather with my great-grandfather Ike going to these different places. And it was very well known within our own family what he saw. And I've met so many Holocaust survivor family groups. And, you know, there's a lot of propaganda coming in from the Nazis that are trying to make him look like the bad guy. Now, it's not about him needing to be the ultimate hero either. It's about seeing what his intention is, stepping away and like looking at the bigger picture of what they're capable of doing, and then finding your own power and leadership within yourself. And maybe having some compassion for the challenges he faced and what he tried to do on our behalf. I think so many of us are stepping up into a leadership role, and it's not about the governmental system anymore of just it being on that one person, because it's never that one person. There's a shadow government that surrounds them. There's multidimensional things going on, galactic wars going on that most people don't even recognize. And, you know, one of the hardest things is their attempt to rewrite history. You know, people can't even accept that there's chemtrails. Somebody might say, oh, those are real clouds. Oh, those are contrails. And we'll find any excuse to step away from the truth. But then those that seek the truth are going to find disinformation, and they're not going to know what to think. And the reason I'm really happy that I was born into this family is to maybe help set the record straight about some of these misunderstandings. Because, you know, for a while I was like, wow, maybe he was a war criminal, even though he's German, but they call him a Swedish Jew. And I have nothing against any race, but I'm just saying, well, they got that one wrong. So, and then again, like I told you, I worked with different channelers and psychics, which I'm wary of, but they all pretty much said the same thing. And I talked to those that are experts in their field of research, and, you know, they said that there's no viable proof, and the statistics are off, and this is not what happened. Yeah, so mostly I put out a video, and at least 10 people post that Eisenhower's a war criminal and tried to wipe out, you know, 1.5 million Germans or something like that. And if people Google other losses on Wikipedia, which is a book that's written about it, they'll see how it's all broken down by different historians and different researchers that basically say, no, this actually isn't what happened. So we can't just look at a documentary or read something without really looking at all sides of it before we form a decision.
Yeah, I agree. And I just, you know, like in this quest for truth, I feel like there's so much that gets distorted, like what you were just saying. And, you know, I myself went through a very traumatic childhood, and not the top 13 families, but I came to be aware that the molestation and the vampirism that was going on was from a family that was not very far underneath the 13th. And it explained a lot of the things that have been going on in my life, but it's been going on interdimensionally as well. So something that's been huge to me is, you know, seeking truth. And I had to go through my own, you know, avenues of discovery. But then, you know, I just started looking at this whole thing about everyone in government being lizards and reptilian, and they're all shape-shifting. And I'm like, you know, everybody's not the bad guy. Let's just say that, you know, everyone is a reptilian. Okay, so what does that mean? What is the point of that? Are they saying that all reptilians are evil? Every time that someone's put in office, am I to assume that they're from the lizard family? And what does that mean? And it just, to me, it becomes overwhelming, because I know that there's a humanity, and I know that even when I look at humanity, you know, we are extraterrestrials. We're interdimensional beings. We all come from different star systems, and, you know, there's nothing to be afraid of as far as that goes. It's really looking at the individual, and it gets back to who we are and who we want to be at this particular time, specifically as we're going through this ascension. I call it Incension, Ascension, because that even is a controversial process.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's true. I mean, we have supposedly 22 different genetics of extraterrestrial, and I would say that the shapeshifters are hybrids that hold a much stronger reptilian genetic, hybridized with what's called the orphan consciousness, which is a really high level of consciousness. And the multi-generational abuse of these family lines have created sort of this possession, but it's also created this power. So if there's an obsession with power and control or domination, they're very susceptible to this part of their genetics. And it's very difficult for them to heal, which is part of, you know, that abuse and indoctrination. But it is on an individual level. You know, yeah. What are we going to do with whatever we were born into, whatever family line, whatever race we feel more of an affinity towards? And not all reptilians are evil at all. There's many very, very benevolent, positive groups. I believe they're in the subterranean underground cities. And we're going to start to get to know just a lot more diversity within all these races, instead of just condemning one race or saying it's all them. You know, it's and I think it's the multi-generational abuse, so that keeps them locked into this system of power and corruption. But yeah, no, the Eisenhower bloodline, I can safely say, isn't in that group. I mean, we're not connected to the 13 families. I think it was just a part of trying to win this larger galactic war that he was able to be put in the position that he was. But then we see, okay, well, they're using him as a scapegoat. There's a lot of blame put on him, or a lot of misunderstandings. And part of the agenda, I mean, because they look at like a whole timeline. They don't look at necessarily, it's just going to be this fragment of a timeline. It's like, well, we're going to do this at this juncture in history to create the result later on. So, okay, we didn't really win the war, but when America got infiltrated and they started to use these technologies of control, now we can change the story. And whoever the good guys are, we can make look bad and begin to steer people into a different mindset and way of being. And they'll put the right people that might not look reptilian or might not even be reptilian to stand for those misconceptions and distortions. I mean, the whole human race has been targeted. I mean, we see it through the media. We see it through anything we've been exposed to, how we were raised, what we were taught about how we see ourselves and each other. I mean, the ultimate target is unity consciousness and our own ability to synthesize our DNA, the masculine and feminine, to begin to step into a more advanced expression, which also relates to the Earth grids, because the Earth grids and the stargates on the Earth have a direct connection with our DNA. And so they've been they have been controlling the stargates for 26,000 plus years with these advanced dark technologies to keep our DNA from being able to come together like that, to keep us fragmented and divided. And that is exactly what they need in order to be able to feed on us. So yeah, there's the negative lower entities that have chosen that particular frequency of their own species, compromising their DNA on purpose to maintain control, but not everybody signed up for that. But, you know, we're talking about a pyramid system. We're talking about a hierarchy, which they've superimposed into religion and politics and, you know, just entertainment industries and distribution of wealth. And, you know, as we see, Mother Earth has been targeted. Her elements have been contaminated and that, you know, to try and make the Mother Earth sick makes us unable to fully connect, because through empathy and osmosis, we're going to be carrying that too. And it's asking us to choose technology and to go with the agenda of transhumanism as a way to fix it, when in reality, we can heal with the mother. The mother's multidimensional. She just needs us to wake up so that she can show us a more pristine form. But as long as we're contaminated, we're going to be experiencing a contaminated dimension.
Okay, yeah, that's something I definitely want to go into in a little bit later, because that's something I kind of want to close with, because I feel like that's really relevant to what's going on right now currently. I want to ask you one more thing before I move on, though, about what we were just speaking of. So when we look at the elections and we look at, okay, what just occurred that was so historical in many ways, where it would have just been assumed that Hillary Clinton would have become the president. No one would have ever even conceived that Donald Trump would actually win an election. To me, it felt like there was a factional change that just took place. I don't know if it was like a coup, a takeover, or if it was it feels like there is some type of factional battle and the factions just changed. And what does that mean? If I'm accurate in what I'm feeling.
Well, there's a lot of intel wars going on. There's a lot of good within these secret groups. Well, not necessarily the secret groups, but the three-letter organizations like the CIA, the NSA even, that have been working real hard to create an ability to make justice happen, to rid those organizations of the corruption and the misuse of power, that have been working for years and years and years. They haven't been able to disclose everything that they've been doing till now. And so we're starting to see the results of those good efforts. I mean, there's the white hats, there's, you know, all sorts of individuals in these organizations that have been working on our behalf that we get glimpses of, or something gets leaked, but then we're let down because we're still not seeing what we'd like to see to, make us feel like we're getting over the hump, until recently with all these pedophile rings coming to light and, you know, all these kind of allegations. But at the same time, there's been mass arrests that they don't want to reveal, because if those that they worked with know that those arrests took place, they'd be able to flee before those guys get grabbed. So there's a little bit of more time on this until we get to really know what's going on, but I think some major players are in some deep doo-doo, and this is appropriate right here at the end of this Ascension window period, even though it doesn't end here. So with that in mind, having this criminal behavior exposed, it's going to prepare people for even more to the story, which is really difficult for people to get their heads wrapped around. But it's really important that people start to understand the corruption, the crimes against humanity, the pedophilia, the Satanism, and it's major. So I remember right before the election, and I'm not necessarily a Trump supporter, so I don't want people to start coming at me over that, but I truly believe he's here to take down pedophilia. And if that's what he's doing, I'm all about it. Do I think he's got character? I think he could polish that up a little bit. I think he pushes people's buttons, and people are looking at more of who he is as a surface character and finding reasons to not appreciate maybe the other things that he's doing. And it's sort of a wait and see sort of thing. But Hillary, I think, went into shock in the whole cabal. In regards to her not winning the election, we could see her getting weakened. So that's a clear representation of that particular power structure and hidden group starting to decline and lose their power in the world, because they rely on our power to have power. They siphon energy, they harvest energy, they feed on energy. And the more of that food source is lacking, the less they'll be able to hold it together, and the more the good can push itself forward. Just like the immune system conquers disease. But we have to feed the immune system. We have to be aware of it. We have to be a participant in it. And I feel like we have done that. And we almost, I have to say, we almost didn't get over that hump. And I feel incredible peace because I can tell that we have. And that it's a snowball. And it's just going to keep increasing. And there's nothing that they can do because they're not in power right now on a larger scale. I mean, they'll still do all that they can, but it's not like it's going to be easy to drag us off to FEMA camps or create, martial law or continue to create false flags without hundreds and hundreds of researchers and people that are whistleblowers busting down everything they attempt to do. And that news gets out there. And there's enough numbers that are willing to look at that to keep that energy above those memes and mind control programs that basically that basically convince people that something's happening, to the point where we become the enablers of it because we don't see any other way out. And they're very strategic in how they present that.
Okay, so do you feel like, with what you were just sharing about Trump, do you feel like that was indeed a factional shift? Like when you say shadow government, do you feel like it was like do you feel like it's the same shadow government with a different face, or do you feel like he's really from a different faction taking down an older faction?
I would probably go with that one more than the other, but I can't completely fix a belief to that.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm getting.
Okay, that's what I was feeling.
I agree with everything about him, and it doesn't mean that I think he's the ultimate, but I have an open mind to what he's attempting to do, because there's enough information coming out that shows that he's not working with the cabal on the same level. Okay. He might still have his own issues with power, or maybe a sordid history that might come to the surface that doesn't make him look that great, but it's nothing compared to this ritual abuse and pedophilia. And if, he ends up being called out for something like that, then yeah, I would go with the first thing you said. But right now, we don't quite know all that yet, and I don't want to make any assumptions. My intuition tells me, though, he's here to take them down. Okay. And there's a lot of individuals within these intel groups that are wishing to support him, but they do agree that he needs to work on some things to gain the respect of the human people, humanity, or those of us in this country, to be effective. But the thing is, we have to broaden our horizons a little bit and not nitpick too much, because the real thing that needs to be conquered and taken down is pedophilia and mind control and these dark technologies and all these different things. We need to have some sort of real disclosure that the president goes to those of us that have been working in this field for long enough to maybe get some advice and counsel from, because many of us have been in this field for long enough, and anybody in a position of power, especially presidency, is incredibly vulnerable to all sorts of manipulation. So hopefully he's strong enough to see through some of the things that will attempt to steer him in the wrong direction. But I think he's already in the know about the darkest and most evil of things, and he's not going to stand for it. So in that, I do support him. But if I'm wrong and he's another one of them with a different face, then I wouldn't say I'd be terribly shocked, but I'm not leaning towards that right now.
Yeah. Well, I'll share this with you. So I don't know if, as far as it being related to Donald Trump necessarily, but it is happening under his watch. I interviewed someone, and this person is formally connected with the government and does remote viewing. And one of the things that he made me very aware of, and it was really interesting because this happened after Trump was elected, and it happened a couple of months before all of these arrests started coming out. And I felt like, because he may have been aware of the situation that I was when we were just talking one-on-one, he looked at me face to face and he said, "I want you to know that I'm going after the pedophilia." He said, "And it's going to be on an elite level. It's going to be your government, politicians, actors, Hollywood." You know, he goes, and he's just really passionate about it. He's like, and excuse my language, but it was kind of like, you know, these son of a bitches are going to burn in hell. That was his, you know, just anger behind it, that this was his passion to make sure that this came out. And then just in a couple months after that, then I saw this start to come out. And so what becomes a little bit murky is then you get all of these celebrities, just in general, people coming out from everywhere, and they're turning it into a circus, making it seem like every single person, you know, was involved in some type of sexual
misconduct.
Yeah, misconduct. And now it's kind of, you can see that there's a kind of an attempt to kind of take away from the credibility of it, but it's coming out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like every day, like, okay, which celebrity or politician gonna be in the headlines now? I mean, it's almost an everyday thing. I mean, today was what, Charlie Rose, is that his name?
Yeah, Charlie Rose.
Yeah.
And, who else? There was someone else that came out. Oh, yeah, even like young guys that are like popular. Ryan Seacrest. Yeah, someone came out and said that he was being sued for $15 million to remain silent. So what they've done is it's so intense, it's so real, and it cuts so deep that they want to make a mockery out of it. So now it's like, you know, there's no credibility in it.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is something that can be stopped. No,
it can't be stopped. And there's, you know, different degrees of it, but it's all part of the same sickness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's the core dark sickness connected to when, you know, children are involved, but none of it's okay. None of it's appropriate. But, you know, at the same time, you know, people do mention a lot of it's to distract us away from some heavier allegations that are out there. But I think it's all just important. Cat's out of the bag. Everything's coming out. The thing is, when one person steps forward, same thing with whistleblowers, it gives other people permission. They think, oh, if somebody's doing it and they've got the guts, I have to have the guts. I mean, or else it just becomes internalized. It becomes this form of shame, and we got to rid ourselves of that. That's part of the power of the divine feminine coming back, and the purification of the negative ego. And it's not a gender thing so much. I mean, women are pedophilias. Women can fall into those categories, and men, you know, sometimes probably feel like they're getting the short end of the stick when it just seems like it's all about the men. But we can't make this a gender battle, because that's part of what our problem's been. We just have to look at it case by case. And know that, you know, I mean, Hillary Clinton, for example, of course, and Nancy Pelosi supposedly, and well, of course. So it's something that's really just a part of the satanistic mentality of vampirism, a parasitic force on this planet. And yeah, it's moving out. And I think people will be a lot more able to integrate some of this other information about Mars agenda, secret space programs, and alien technology. I mean, I think that's the next step. But if we don't know who the criminals are, and if we don't see the crimes against humanity, we could easily be manipulated by those very people. Knowing that disclosure is coming out, they can still leverage it in their favor. And that, I feel, is ending too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you brought up something else that I was going to go into. I love it when that kind of happens. It just starts to flow because I was going to ask you about disclosure next. You know, I think that we're going to, like, we already know that the disclosure is kind of something that's just being done for the masses to be presented as though, oh, the aliens have just appeared. And, you know, it's kind of like, this is going to be something that's going to be like on CNN or Fox News, where all of a sudden we see, you know, there's been an alien invasion or contact has been made. And I was just curious if you knew, if you had any insight on how close we are to that, and if they're going to try to present this as something that is as hostile or friendly, or are they going to present it as a truthful history that exists? How are they going to roll this out?
Well, that's why I would hope that anybody in a position of power would look to the community of people that have been talking about it for years, you know, where we've been sorting through the information, we've been listening to all different sides and looking at the galactic history, looking at the experiencers, looking at all different levels of contact and abduction scenarios, recognizing that there's a lot of different species that are working with the Earth, working with governments, living inside the planet and off planet. And as far as who's going to make contact first and where this disclosure is going to go, I mean, I think it depends on our frequency and what we're carrying and the timeline that we're best suited for our greatest soul development. Even if it is not fully positive, there's going to be a point at which the soul snaps out of it. And if they don't, you know, they will always have that opportunity. But we have to be very careful about how anything's presented to us. I mean, we have, what I have come to understand, a lot of benevolent groups that are working with us, the guardians. Corey Good talks about the sphere beings. We've got the aquafarians that were once extinct. They were extinct during the electrical wars that have now come back. We're talking about groups from Andromeda that are coming in because in this ascension window period, the Milky Way and Andromeda become one again. And so these beings, you know, from the Andromeda galaxy are assisting and actually helping to host this organic ascension timeline called the crystal star hosting. And what it does is it allows us to reconnect with our galactic chakras, and it helps us to upgrade our DNA. And then some of the species or groups that have been working more closely with Earth, that have been with us this whole time, there's a lot of those benevolent groups that are around as well. And so if there's going to be disclosure, I think a lot of it depends on what is holding more momentum on a collective level. And I would say that the real disclosure is going to have more to do with the benevolence than not, because we've already been invaded by the negatives or the malevolent controller ones. I don't see there being an invasion happening that isn't something that they stimulate or create through like a blue beam technology or some sort of fake scenario to then shift the way that we perceive extraterrestrials and how we're going to work with them. And then there could be a scenario where disclosure is about certain groups that they present as positive, that have all these life-saving technologies that might stunt our ability to step into all that we're truly made of, that could take us off track. So we have to really determine within ourselves what sort of timeline do we want to be on, what sort of experience do we need to have, and be consistent with it and ground it and anchor it, because we're multidimensional bodies. We have connections to all these races. We don't always have to think based on what humanity's going through either, because we're at a crossroads. We're going to see all sorts of scenarios, and from one minute to the next, it might shift. I think the most important disclosure is your inner truth, the truth that you find, and to be able to ask yourself, does it resonate with what you're hearing? You know, and to get the education before you wait for the governments to step forward or any leader to step forward saying, well, this is how it is. The more background knowledge we have, the more we can call it out and say, no, that doesn't resonate with me. Or wait a second, this is really good. This feels right. But we can't force other people to go along with it. We can just be resources, you know, for people to have refer to.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I view everything. If I didn't experience it, then it can't be my truth. I can listen to what other people share, and if it resonates with me, it's like, oh, that's a confirmation for me just of where my soul path is and how I connect with this person and where I'm going. So but I know that everyone is having the experience that their soul intends to have, and so that brings up something else. When you're talking about the organic timeline and ascension, and you know what the best path for our soul is, do you see ascension as something that has to happen with everyone all at once, or do you see that we're going through our own personal? So if we're on an organic timeline, is everyone supposed to, from your perspective, ascend at once, or do we all go onto our own individual ascension paths that may take us completely out of this universe while other people are still experiencing here?
Well, I think we're all at different levels as souls. I think the foundational organic ascension timeline that we're not necessarily all going to experience the same way, but it's going to be on the same track, all leading towards, the same sort of goal of advancement. And then there's those other scenarios, which I have faith those scenarios are being eradicated, and that the human race isn't as vulnerable as it used to be to those other scenarios, artificial intelligence, artificial timelines, entering sort of a phantom Earth that is an NWO sort of alien government that is looking to enslave more. I really feel like we're winning the larger war, whereas before it seemed a lot more individual, that there'd be a clear bifurcation, and I still think there'll be a bifurcation, but the thing that's bifurcating off is not going to manipulate as many souls away as maybe what it used to be, because of all that's coming out now and all the efforts that we all have put forward to help, inform people. And I feel like we've all felt that urgency, oh my gosh, almost like the sand, the hourglass thing, like running out of time here, just feeling all that within ourselves, which propels us to work harder or share more or really look into the depths of, all these things. What is it we need to do, and what's the most important priority right now? And I really think that large-scale ascension is much more what's happening versus just a few who get it that might move on. And when we talk about moving on, I don't see it as floating away. It's very much a part of what this planetary body is made of, because this planetary body is seeded with ascension energies. So it's our process of purification and upgrades in our DNA and expansion in our awareness that is going to change the landscape of our reality. And we're all at different places, but again, there's a huge difference between being at different levels on the same sort of track versus not being there at all and being completely unconscious to these other timelines that they've tried to establish, which I feel like are crumbling all over the place. And so it's going to be very hard for even the most unconscious person to lose themselves to that trap, because they're going to start to see these criminals. They're going to start to see through it. And they'll probably go through a crisis, which is going to be my focus, is helping to rehabilitate some of all that, to assist in that. But it's going to be very hard to steer anybody when there's so much attention on all the sickness that's been going on. People will think twice because they will have that revelation of, wow, I actually thought that she was okay or he was okay. And once you get duped once, it's very easy for it to happen again. And so I feel really confident with where we're at right now, because it's catching people in the nick of time. Because if those things weren't coming out, those leaders could still be, saying what they say and everything else hiding from people's sight or awareness. And they wouldn't have a chance to think twice. So now that's not the case anymore. So this is a huge victory I'm feeling for the collective.
Yeah. And also, like when you're talking about the timelines and them, it feels like they're just collapsing into the organic timeline. And so they'll just, because I don't think that there's anything that can be superior or that can really take you off of the organic timeline, not truly the organic, because that is like, to me, it's kind of like when you think of a biblical way of expressing, it's like the end of days, the end of time. It's just the end of a cycle. And it feels, wherever we're going to go from there, I don't know, but that's just the way that it feels to me whenever I feel into that energy and to what's real and what's a distraction. Mm-hmm. And it feels like everything's just collapsing back into the original timeline. And
it's just like, it's a replica of who we are as humans when we, we're raised in a system, and there's social engineering, and there's peer pressure, and there's, media, magazines, television, and all these things that divert us from our core organic truth. But it's so much more powerful that we collapse all those things and return to who we are on an authentic level. And so, I think, yes, there's artificial timelines, but they're like sub-personalities like we might hold that aren't really real to us, that anytime along the way that soul or an epiphany could happen where that soul recognizes, wait a second, that's not me. I don't need to be a part of that creation or that that I don't need to be on that trajectory. And I think everybody has that opportunity no matter what. The speed at which people do that and the ramifications of not doing it quick enough, that's a whole nother thing. And again, I think it's an individual thing based on where that person is in their journey. But I do think there's two distinct experiences, one where we advance into these higher earth energies and another one where it's very much a transhumanism, artificial intelligence based, world. But I do see all that collapsing. I don't think it can be fully eradicated, but I'm never going to give up. And I do feel the ripple effect of all this is weakening it to such a point where everybody's going to just jump on board. I mean, I'm just going to hold that. And if not, I mean, the thing is the stellar activation cycle of the Ascension window period supposedly ends in 2017, but it doesn't mean that people won't still be waking up or getting activated or recognizing, what's going on. The most important things have been accomplished. People like Hillary not being in office, the Bushes and the Clintons being, not in the picture like they used to be. It doesn't mean they're not still attempting to do certain things, but they're not necessarily the darkest of the dark. There's deeper aspects to it all, and they're participating in it, of course. But the fact that that's not ruling, the powers that be have basically lost their foothold at this particular phase in our journey. It's going to be a lot easier for people to just step into the organic.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like, like I said, we grow up programmed, but say we go off on a camping trip or we have an organic experience, it can go in like a heartbeat. It's just a simple epiphany and a change of perspective. Mm-hmm. And that whole tipping point thing and things that, people like Cobra talk about, like the event, really does have to do with that mass, that mass shift on a huge scale. And people don't have to understand the kind of information we do to get there. Mm-hmm. It's not like a requirement. It helps, but it's going to be a shift in the frequency, and people are going to feel it in their physical body. Whereas if they keep going for the lies or the distortions, their physical body is going to make it very clear that, something needs to happen. Now, hopefully that'll happen before these technologies get introduced that might play a role in further enslavement, before maybe the technologies that can really help us to get back on track are available. And I definitely feel like the good stuff, the benevolent beings, the positive technologies that relate to vibration, sound, and color versus mind control and, becoming completely robotic or integrated into more of a computer system, that's more on our side. But we're still going to see those stories. I mean, there's some new computer out that has named Sophia. I can't remember what country she's associated with, but now has citizenship or something. And
Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to see some of that type of stuff, but are we really seeing it on the massive scale they expected us to be experiencing right now? No, we're not. So it's too difficult for them to be able to anchor these timelines in people's hearts and consciousness when they're too busy being busted. I mean, they're more like freaking out than thinking of their next move. Now they're trying to figure out where the hell they're going to run.
Yeah. So, here's the I want to go into this. This is probably where I'd like to just go into this a little bit and kind of close it this time, and maybe we could go deeper, another time. But like, I know that your passion is for humanity and to connect to the organic path and to move away from transhumanism, and that you're here as a guardian to the earth. And I know that I'm here for humanity and for earth. And one of the things we've got to do is integrate the masculine and the feminine and kind of get rid of all of this patriarchy, matriarchy, back and forth, and just be humanity. But as we're going into this technology, because not to the level that you're talking about, but, we can see that it's being put out there every day now to put it in everyone's consciousness. But do you feel that with the technology that's being put out there now, like that we can empower ourselves while working in this intelligence through communication, creativity, in a way that we use it with pure intentions from our heart to create and to help humanity and earth, versus the intent to turn everyone into robots and to, basically try to enslave humanity deeper into perversion, is the only way that I guess that I could explain it.
So
Yeah.
you think, do I feel it's possible?
Yeah. Do you feel like that, that we can use the technology? We can't pretend like we're using artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And we're going to use financial systems, and we're going to travel, and we're going to have digital devices, and blah, 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 blah. So at some point we can't just go through and fear and say, well, I can no longer do an interview because I'm going to be using artificial intelligence.
Right. Well, I think that just comes down to the strength of the soul. I mean, we breathe in chemtrails every day. We're dealing with toxicity in our environment. Some people get sick, some people don't. Doesn't mean if you get sick that you're weak. It means that you're still building your immune system, or you're still finding a vibration within yourself to override that toxicity or those assaults. So if we're dealing with computers, or we're dealing with EMF still, and things coming through our cell phones and different control mechanisms that they use through the technologies we're using, well, it's going to be easy for somebody who's unconscious to fall prey to the dark aspects of it. And for people that use it to share positive messages, that's a stronger vibration. So we can use these tools. What I encourage people to do is turn the weapons into tools that serve you. Then they're no longer weapons. And there's a phase of being unconscious to the weapon part, which makes one vulnerable to being controlled. And then there's the reaction to the fact that there's those control things. And then one is kind of in that anger and doesn't know, should I get rid of it? Should I walk away and just seek everything pure and organic? And then I think there's a stage where, okay, it's a launching pad for now, for us to come together in unity, for us to also show them who we are when they are using it as a way to track us or keep up with us. Well, we get to announce these sort of things, that we see what's going on, we're exposing what's going on. So whatever weapon or however they're trying to utilize that, we're turning into something that can empower us and can help us to step away from it. So I see it sort of as a temporary phase that we are utilizing to then step into things like telepathy and our greater spiritual abilities and things that we're beginning to unfold into. And then that necessity will be gone. But if we don't recognize the importance of our soul or spiritual development in the midst of having this participation in the technological world, some souls will get wrapped up into the part of those technologies that are being used as a weapon. So, I mean, there was a time where I was very affected by the weaponry and the targeting that was on me, but I'm like, well, I can't just snap my fingers and make it go away, but I can raise my vibration above it. I can utilize it in a way that gives me the upper hand. And we can do the same thing with when we see chemtrails in the sky, or, everything that's going on there. We can remind ourselves that they're just trying to stop us because they're threatened by our power and our potential. So let that be a reminder. Don't let it, make you feel like there's no escape from this. This is the beauty of us being multidimensional beings, is that we can always reach a higher frequency than these lower assaults. We always have that, even if it surrounds us. I mean, we're dealing with a certain level of duality constantly in our bodies. And the only reason we would get sick to the point of degradation or illness to death is because we lose a grip on having a connection with the root of it, or our ability to heal it and transform it or create alchemy. And we keep coming back until we master it. So there's no issue if we don't make it, or if we haven't made it in the past, or if we're struggling right now. It's a part of our homework as human species here to learn how to overcome it and become masters again.
See, and so like I've had chemtrails sprayed over my house. It looks like a war zone. I mean, literally, if someone were looking up, and I remember we were at a restaurant that's really close to home, and, I don't get sick from these chemtrails, but it looked like a war zone. And we looked up, and there was a cook that came out of the restaurant, and he came out just to smoke a cigarette, and he saw us looking up, and he looked up and he goes, "Oh my God, it's the end of the world." And it was like he had never looked up. He saw us looking up, and he was just like, he didn't know what was happening, but it was really that intense. It was like funnels that had been created from all the chemtrails. Yeah, it was crazy. But so, and what you just shared too, and I really want this is so huge to me. I really want people to hear what Laura is sharing here. Because we are sovereign beings. We are creator beings. We have the power within us. And anything that we use, it's going to be malevolent or benevolent. It's really up to us and our intentions. So if I look at this microphone that I'm talking with, and I look at it as an enemy, and I I have hatred towards this, and I'm fighting this, and I'm creating something that's really negative. But if I look at this as, wow, this is a great piece of artificial intelligence that's actually allowed me to have a great conversation with someone, get information that's being shared on another piece of artificial intelligence, which is the internet, and I have respect and communication in a way that's loving and integrating, there's nothing to fear. And I feel like so many people are getting caught up in, let's find the most negative part that we can focus on and create fear and try to destroy it, instead of bringing it into harmony through their purest of intentions. That just feels like it's coming from trauma that's unhealed too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in every moment, we get to decide how we're going to be in relationship to everything around us, whether it's artificial intelligence or something, in nature. Mm-hmm. We have to decide ultimately, to be free thinkers, to raise our level of awareness through, doing research and really more than anything, doing the inner work, knowing ourselves and how we tick, what our boundaries are, what our inspirations and our passions are, and what it's going to take for us to feel released from the traumas of the past, the toxicity in our environment, the things that put us in those sort of negative patterning loops. We can blast all this away with exactly what you just said. And the thing is, I think there's going to be a point in which we can let go of those things because we found a different way to communicate with each other. But until then, it's really working, because look at all the numbers of people that get in touch with this information. It changes them. It wakes them up. They're probably blasting out stuff all the time to sort of prevent that. But there's certain individuals like us and those in this field and those that aren't in this field that hold too high of a frequency. And again, it's the same thing with, being exposed to even certain toxins or bacterias or parasites. Some people are going to be affected, some people aren't. And again, if you are affected, it doesn't mean you're weaker. It just means that's a piece that you're working with in order to learn to overcome it. And that's how you build an immune system. We can't stick our kids in a bubble. It's all about being exposed to your environment to build the resistance and build the immunity. And I see it on a multidimensional level with technology, with these weapons, with any form of mind control, because people reach a breaking point. The truth is so much louder, and they didn't get their grips in there enough to be able to succeed in what they set out to do. So we should all feel very proud of ourselves.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm very aware of is that at this point, I can't be controlled on that level. No one can take me away from the connectivity that I already have with my greater being. No one can sever from me that connection, because it's become so strong, and it's something that every day I set my intentions, my boundaries, and so I'm not in opposition. Instead, I am more navigating through the processes with pure intentions. Yeah. And so I feel like that's just, something that if we can just look at this for everyone that's listening, that this is something that we can create, and we're going to choose how we're going to create our way through this, just period. It's going to be our choice. No one's going to do this to us. We're going to do it to ourselves by how we engage and the way we set our intentions every day. So that fear is coming from really not being in touch with your greater being, I feel like. Yeah.
Yep. And not recognizing the vastness of your creative imagination, and how when you align with that, it generates through you, and it becomes the vibration and frequency you carry that can, affect everything around you. I mean, it's all about giving your power away. People slip into these traps. They don't think they have it in themselves. They feel like they're at the mercy of everything going on around them, and almost feel like a victim to it, which is an appropriate part of the process to feel into that, and not to deny any part of the process. But when you get to the other side, nothing can really stop you. And every challenge that gets thrown is something, you have the capability of overcoming. And that's the greatest thing that we can, work with right now is recognizing that this is the one thing that they've tried to keep us from knowing, is that we hold the ultimate power to shape our destiny. And I always like to say, even though it's a bit redundant, is that we win the war within. Mm-hmm. We can't just be in battle mode constantly. I mean, we can to a certain degree to seek justice and to, put truth out there, but to go out and actually battle it is going to take from us a lot. We need to win the war within by divorcing the things that we're not in agreement to, and neutralizing the things that we can't escape from until we step into the next level.
Yeah. And, I think to a certain degree, one of the things that I've noticed about myself, and because I'm using technology on a daily basis to do the things that I'm doing, but I'm also taking the time to make sure that I connect organically. And I don't know, I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, but you will find that you are communicating telepathically already with certain people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you have that already. So it's not taken away from me. In fact, it's probably making me so much more aware of, because I'm not in opposition. I'm not in anger. I'm not embracing the malevolent part. I'm strictly focusing on my intentions, which are to aid humanity and to be here and work with Mother Earth. And so it's actually, I see that my telepathic skills and stuff have even improved.
Yeah. That's excellent. Yeah. And yeah, it's not going to compromise us unless we are unconscious to who we are.
Yeah.
And this is the great process of awakening. It's not just awakening to conspiracies or having an idea of what ascension means. It's knowing who you are, what you're made of. And the greatest way to get there is to just be yourself. Allow yourself to feel when you feel, allow yourself to work through, the different levels of emotions and wounds. And yeah, there's a lot of dark night of the souls, and yeah, it's not always fun. And sometimes it's just crippling and you just are in a fetal position over it. But, that's what's so important about supporting one another during these times. We don't have to hide from each other, because we've been taught that the facades and how we present ourselves has to look a certain way. And if we can just be willing to see the real truth and the fact that we're rehabilitating, we have to face some of this shadow stuff as more of a collective, not so much always on an individual level. Our hearts are just going to expand towards each other, and we can live on a much more real level, because this is real stuff that's going on. Look at our history. It's so dark. Yeah. But I think it first starts with getting real enough with yourself so you know that you're choosing the right people to surround yourself with that can really hold space for you, or, vice versa.
Yes, I really agree with that. Yeah. And I just look at the excitement for me. It's just being able to see how well, with all the things that are coming in right now that normally would be so fearful to me, I'm actually excited about the opportunity to see what we can create through this and to show just how sovereign we are. So for me, it's exciting. We've had enough of the dark stuff,
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
We have nothing but ourselves to look forward to, and we've been robbed from it. There's been so much theft and so much manipulation and just the disconnect of the masculine and feminine, and people really wanting to heal, or people really willing to correct themselves or forgive themselves and each other, and all those that aren't in agreement are the things that are being purged out and exposed, because they're not running that. They're not coming from that human soul, that beautiful human soul that we all carry. That's what they're in opposition to, and they're not going to be fed anymore.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much. This has been great. Is there something, don't you have something coming up in January that you might want to share?
Yes, I'll be in Australia. There's an event at Uluru, which is a sacred site in Australia, otherwise known as Ayers Rock. And that is January 12th to 14th. And then another Close Encounters conference in Coffs Harbour, Australia, a little bit later in the month. I'll get the link and put it in the thread so that people can find it to get more of the details. But it's going to be really excellent. The site Uluru connects with the 13th gate, which is very significant. I speak about that in my talks. And it relates to the Mother Earth energies and these huge activations that are helping us to reconnect with the Divine Mother and the 0 point energy and what goes beyond that into the 7 higher heavens connected to Andromeda, and the full wholeness of our soul architecture and our multidimensional bodies are coming back online, with some major activations coming from there ever since the sun started to move through the 13th sign especially. And this is what this window is all about. And people will experience it from afar. It's there for everybody, but to be at that particular location is going to be powerful. So, if people can make it, it's well worth it. But you'll still receive the activations, because it's happening regardless of anybody being there, because the earth and the cosmos are designed to bring us somewhere incredibly special. We just have to know it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'll share that when I put this up on YouTube and on the website, and I'll send you a link also. Yeah, I think it's going to be awesome. Two of my friends, James Bartley and George Kavassilas, are going to be participating in one of those events with you too, so that's pretty exciting.
I really look forward to seeing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.